Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is the channel where I paint my face, turn my camera on, and talk about some books. Now, I've never felt like I had enough authority or enough books read or anything like that to really make a recommendations video for you guys, especially because the vast majority of what I was reading, at least when I first started my booktube channel, was a lot of catch up on all the books that were really popular during the time that I wasn't reading. So I was playing a lot of catch up with things like The Cruel Prince, Throne of Glass, all the Sarah J Maas, frankly, the Scythe series, the Shadowhunter world, all that kind of thing. I was playing catch up, and only now do I feel like I've read enough to really be able to tell you guys about the sorts of books that I think you guys should pick up, and not all books that are really popular already. Maybe some things that you haven't heard of or you haven't heard a lot of people talk about, and maybe you'll find a new favorite out of this video. As you can probably tell from the title of this video, this is 5 fantasy recommendations that I have read recently. I'm planning to do this for a lot of the genres that I sort of favorite, so things like romance, mystery, that kind of thing. So we're starting with fantasy, and let's kick straight into the first book, which is This Woven Kingdom by Tahereh Mafi. This is the beautiful Illumicrate edition of the book, so you've got the lovely hardcover there. It's all printed directly onto it. Equally beautiful, obviously, on the back and on the spine, sprayed edges, and then some beautiful end papers as well. You're likely very familiar with this author from the Shadow Me series, maybe, if you've read that. I believe that's a bit of a dystopian romance, but this is the latest series from this author, and it's set in a world where the magical species or the magical race called the Jinn are essentially isolated and exiled, forced to live in secret by the human king who is currently in power after a long ago war and betrayal of these people. We follow Eliza, who is the long lost heir to the ancient Jinn kingdom, and she is forced to hide in plain sight as the servant for a noble household, while also sort of having a side job, I guess, of being a seamstress, which is her sort of passion. Until one day she runs into the crown prince Kamran, and both their lives are thrown into absolute turmoil as their immediate attraction to each other puts both their lives at risk and threatens to uproot the kingdom and bring about a prophecy that tells of the current king and his kingdom's fate, which is essentially the downfall of the kingdom and his death. So what did I like about this story? The absolute winner for me in this book was the writing. I thought that the way it was written and the way it evoked imagery in my mind was just so beautiful and so vivid. I believe the story is based on a famous Middle Eastern poem which tells of the story, or a romanticized version of the story, of the Persian Empire. So it's set in a world, in a setting that I'm not familiar with, which meant the writing and the setting and the building of that world was extra important when it came to picking up this book. And I think the way that that was achieved through the writing, through such vivid imagery when it's describing colors and food and clothing and the buildings and the monarchy and everything, was just so incredible. And whilst I wouldn't say that the characters and the sort of plot of the story is anything particularly groundbreaking in terms of what you think of when you think YA, romance, fantasy, there is one aspect of this story that I really loved, or one aspect of the characters that I really loved, and that was our main character, Eliza. The thing that I really loved was that she is a powerful Jinn woman with magical abilities, and she is fully aware of it. So often in YA do you have a woman or a man who is like the chosen one in the story, and they don't know about their powers, they don't know about their history, so there's a big sort of training montage that happens. Whereas in this book, Eliza was fully aware of her history, fully aware of her power, fully aware of the fact that she was this long lost heir to an ancient Jinn kingdom, and she was willing to do anything to protect herself, even if it meant killing or hurting the people who were trying to attack her. And I really appreciate it because it felt really different and, let's be honest, refreshing. I haven't read the rest of this series, so I can't talk to how it fits in with the rest of the series or how it goes from here, but I did immediately buy the second book after finishing this first one. So for me, that's always a good sign that I absolutely loved it, and I'm really intrigued to keep going. So this is the first recommendation. Next up, we've got Godkiller by Hannah Kana. This is a very recent release, and this is, again, beautiful edition of the story. This isn't Waterstones exclusive or anything. It is just absolutely gorgeous. And I think the thing that absolutely sold me on this book was the end paper. You do not get end papers like that in a standard book. That tends to only be special editions. So the fact that that was standard was just incredible to me, and I thought the artwork was beautiful. But as for what this story is about, it opens on Kissen and her family, and they are living in a sort of fanatical society that praises the gods in a very, very fanatical and cult-like way. And in order to appease the gods, they decide they're going to sacrifice Kissen and her family. Kissen manages to survive this, but all her family has been killed. So naturally, this sparks a hatred for the gods and worship of the gods. So she goes on to become a rather infamous Godkiller, until one day she meets a god that she can't kill because it's attached itself to the life of a young noble girl on the run. So Kissen, the girl, the god Skedeketh, and a rather reluctant warrior soldier Elagast all venture to a destroyed city in order to each sort of achieve their own goals. So for Kissen, that is to remove the god from the girl and kill it. For Elagast, it's a bit more secretive, a bit more mysterious, and for the god and the young girl, it's secret and mysterious as well. It's a really, really fascinating sort of journey style novel, which very much flows into my first thing of what I liked about this story, and that is the way that it executed this journey style novel. So journey style stories are not something that I usually like. I think they're very A to B to C. They can be very formulaic and very, very boring, but I really, really liked it in this case, and that was really unexpected for me. The way the journey sort of interacted with relationship growth between all the different characters and then genuine character growth as well was really interesting, and the way it integrated sort of this found family and really dedicated time to just these characters getting to know each other, getting to know themselves, revealing who they were, I think was really, really important in holding my interest. Plus there was this other aspect thrown in of they were constantly getting attacked while they were on this journey, and you always knew that there was another attack coming. It was kind of timed, and it was kind of revealed that these attacks were timed, like one every couple of days or something. And that didn't destroy the tension in the way that you'd expect, in that, you know, you can always see it coming. So it's like, oh, is it really that much of a surprise? Because every single attack you knew it was going to get worse and worse and worse, and you didn't know how the characters were going to get out of it the next time and the next time. So it just added to the level of tension and anxiety. And because it spent so much time building the relationships between the characters between those attacks, I felt really connected to them, so it made me even more scared for them. So the way those two elements worked together, I think was really, really expertly done. As for character growth, I think the way the characters grew throughout the story was really, really good. Each of them came into it with their own prejudices, their own secrets. Obviously, Kissen does not like the gods and has had horrible experiences with them. She's a god killer. But then through getting to know the young noble girl and Skedeketh and Elagast even, her eyes were opened up to see things a little bit more gray, see the world less black and white, and that happened for all of the characters, which I really, really appreciated. They definitely felt very, very well-rounded, and they grew through the story. This is definitely the sort of story where if you blink, you'll miss something, so you have to pay a lot of attention. But like I said, I really liked how much emphasis was placed on growing those characters, growing those relationships, creating that found family, so that when there were moments where each character had to sacrifice themselves for the good of the group or for the good of others, it made sense. I was able to buy into it because that time had been spent building that relationship. Love this book, 100% recommend it. Next up, we've got a book that I think you guys might be more familiar with because it is an oldie but a goodie, and that is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. I only picked this one up really, really recently after I saw Ashley over at Frolic Through Fiction do a read of this entire series, and it kind of spiked my interest for it because it's a massive TBR vet for me that I just wasn't getting around to because of the size of it. As for what it's about, it's set in France in a monarchist society where our main character Lou is not only forced to hide from the kingdom that would persecute her because she's a witch, but from her own mother as well. After a heist goes incredibly wrong, Lou is forced into a bit of an arranged marriage with a witch killer named Reed, and is obviously forced to conceal her true identity as a witch because she needs to protect herself. But of course, living in the barracks of hyper-aware witch killers only presents more threat and danger to her, especially as she starts to grow feelings for her husband and her mother starts to really not play ball. So let's talk about what I liked about it. Firstly, Reed. Full stop, exclamation point, cinnamon bun hero, wrap him up in a blanket, take him home, absolutely like just want to give him a cuddle kind of hero. I loved him as the romantic interest. Obviously, Reed presents a bit of a complication being in a relationship with Lou in this story, or being forced to marry Lou in this story, because his beliefs so irrevocably contradict everything that she is. He's a witch killer and he strongly believes in what he's doing, and she's a witch. But as he gets to know her through the story, he at first feels connected to her out of duty. He's been forced to marry her and he's determined to be committed to her out of duty. But then as he gets to know her, his feelings grow for her. And then as her identity is sort of revealed, or it comes into question, he's forced to look in on his beliefs and what he thinks is right and begin to really analyze that. And I think the way that he does that through the story is just really like cinnamon bun. Love him for it, because he fully accepts that he needs to rethink things, and he does, and I love that. He has to confront his own beliefs and fight to understand and accept her, and he does that, and he invests so much in their relationship, and it's just so sweet, and I love it. Outside of our cinnamon bun hero, I loved Lou, our main female character, as well. I believe the majority of the story is told through her perspective, but it is dual perspective, so you do get it in Reed's POV as well. And she is so mysterious. Like, you don't know her true origins, you don't know where she's come from, how she's connected to this sort of tyrannical kingdom as well as tyrannical witch society. You don't really know why she's on the run because it's all concealed until later in the book, and then it's all revealed. I also thought the atmosphere was absolutely palpable, and I think a big element of that is obviously you've got a witch living in the barracks of the witch killers, so you've constantly got this anxiety and tension of how she's going to conceal her true identity, especially because when a witch performs magic, it leaves behind a smell. So every time she performs magic, oftentimes to protect someone or heal someone or help someone, she's then forced to try and scramble to cover up what she's done so that she won't be found out and persecuted and essentially killed by the man that she's married. The will they, won't they element of the romance was definitely very addictive, and I loved how romantic the setting felt as well, like the old Parisian streets and the buildings and the food and the way everything was just laid out and written was just really romantic and lush. Despite being a fairly long book, this was a really speedy read. I absolutely flew through it, and I can't wait to get to the rest of the series. I haven't read the other two books yet, so I can't comment on those, but I am a little bit worried about them because I've had a lot of people say this book was amazing, but those two weren't great. So hopefully I enjoy the next two as much as I enjoyed this one, but I'm a little scared. Next up, we've got the fourth book, which is Only a Monster by Vanessa, and this is the beautiful Fairy Loot edition of this story. So we've got the cover, beautiful on the back as well, sprayed edges, and artwork on the end papers, which is different on both sides. So absolutely love the addition of this story. But as for what it is about, it starts with Joan, who is sent to stay with her late mother's eccentric family at their estate in London. She's 16 years old and she's looking forward to the perfect summer as she gets a job at the historic Holland House, which absolutely quenches the history nerd in her, plus the fact that she's super attracted to her co-worker Nick, and he asks her out on a date, until a Good Samaritan attempt gone wrong sends her sort of hurtling through time and learning that her family aren't a regular family, they are monsters, and Nick, this guy that she's super keen on, is part of an infamous gang, I guess, of monster hunters. After a massacre that destroys Joan's entire world, she is then sent hurtling through time once again alongside Aaron, who is the heir to a monster family that hates her own, in order to run away from the monster hunters and hopefully change history, only to find out that Nick, the guy she likes, is pursuing her through history as well. Let's talk about what I liked about this story, and the very first thing that I noticed is that it's a YA fantasy romance with YA aged characters who actually act their age, which is so rare, I feel, in YA. So often in YA, you've got 15, 16, 17-year-old kids who are devising battle strategy and fighting wars. And I look at them and I go, when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I didn't know how to function at like high school, let alone do everything that they're doing. So I'm just really not able to buy into these characters a lot of the time. But this was so different. The characters felt young, impulsive, immature. They were making decisions that they thought would solve all the problems. They had the sort of naive and innocent view that everything would be okay in the end if they just, you know, turned back time and went back and their whole family would be saved. And I really loved that. These kids are actually acting like kids. I also think the relationships between all the different kids were really, really well developed as well. So I was actually able to buy into the moments where they would sacrifice themselves in order to help someone else or something like that. And again, that's just nice to see, because it's not often that you see that in a YA, especially in the sort of first book in a series. Everything's sort of sped along to build the world and everything, and the relationships are often left in the back of the mind. Outside of that, I thought the settings of all the different times were really well written. So when they went back into the past, I believe they went into the 90s, the way that the world and the clothing and the building and everything was described, you could tell it was really well researched. There was a bit of a love triangle in this story, as you probably guessed from the blurb, between Joan, our main character, Nick, the co-worker, and Aaron Oliver, the heir to the monster family that hates her own. One of them was like a slow burn romance and the other one was a bit of a soulmates romance. And I definitely think the slow burn romance was way more well developed than the soulmates one. The soulmates one kind of felt a little impulsive and it relied too heavily on the soulmates thing without actually developing that romance out a little bit. So that is something to note for this read, that, you know, I really hope when the sequel sort of comes out that it focuses on that slow burn rather than the soulmates, because I can't buy into the soulmates, so that might be disappointing. I don't know, something to look for. But all in all, I really enjoyed this read and I would definitely recommend it, and I'm looking forward to the sequel that will come out hopefully in the next couple months. Apologies, my camera just ran out of battery, but we are back with the last recommendation, which is Belladonna by Adalyn Grace. Again, this is the beautiful Fairy Loot edition of the book, so beautiful cover, beautiful on the back. We've got lovely sprayed edges, and I believe, yeah, artwork on the end papers as well. Hardback is absolutely phenomenal. I love that the flowers are printed onto it, so yeah, beautiful edition of the book. But as for what it is about, ever since she was born, Signa has felt like she was cursed. Orphaned from birth, she's been passed around from relative to relative, with each relative that she gets passed to meeting an untimely end, and each relative really being more interested in her wealth than her well-being. Until Signa reaches the Hawthorne family, an eccentric family residing at Thorn Grove, whose patriarch is mourning the loss of his late wife via wild and vivacious parties, as his heir tries to clean up the mess of their reputation. When Signa finds out that the Hawthorne family's daughter suffers from the same illness that the late matriarch suffered from before she died, and then is visited by the spirit of the matriarch saying that she was poisoned, Signa is determined to make this family and this situation last. And so she enlists the help of a stable boy in order to do so, but quickly realizes that the only way she's going to be able to save this family is if she enlists the help of Death, who has never been far from her side as she grew up, and who is forcing Signa to confront the fact that their connection may be more powerful and irresistible than she ever dared to imagine. So let's talk about what I like about this book. Firstly, I know it's described by a lot of people as a gothic fantasy, and I don't think I would necessarily describe it the same way. I would say it's a romance or a fantasy romance, I think it's YA, set in a gothic setting. So the setting is definitely very eerie, very creepy, very dark and mysterious, but I wouldn't necessarily call the larger fantasy element of it gothic. It definitely has this air of corruption and intrigue and mystery and nothing really being as it seemed, which definitely lent to the intrigue of the story. I loved how it mixed murder mystery, romance and fantasy, all those sort of three genres into one, and it was able to give enough to each of those genres so that you never really felt like it was more of a one thing over the other. They just all seamlessly worked together. And oh my god, I mean, the plot twist at the end was entirely unexpected, utterly baffling, utterly amazing. It was just incredible and my jaw hit the floor. The romance was definitely hate to love for Signa, but you definitely had the sort of romantic person in the background that very much had the feelings for Signa that she wasn't willing to acknowledge. There is a bit of a love triangle, though I will say it's very, very easy to predict from the very beginning who Signa is going to end up with. But all in all, it was a non-stop, one sitting, could not put this book down read for me, and I cannot wait for the sequel, which I think, or I'm hoping I will get in the Fairy Loot edition as well to match this one. Those are the 5 books that I would recommend that you pick up in the fantasy genre. Hopefully there are some on this list that you haven't heard of before, or if you have heard of these and read these, then let me know in the comments down below what you think of them, whether you agree with my rating of them, and maybe some other fantasy recommendations that you have for me. I would be really, really interested to know, and I love talking to you guys, and I do my best to reply to every single comment. I really, really hope that you enjoyed this video and are looking forward to seeing more of them, and if you are, do let me know by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell all down below. It's a super, super easy way to help my channel grow, and I will see you lovely people in my next video. Bye!